Hello, my name's Richard. I'm a retired medical doctor, so I suppose my proper name is Dr. Richard Kent, but actually everybody calls me Richard. And for the next 1 hour, we're going to be talking about evolution is impossible. And I'd like you to focus mostly on the screen rather than me. Just a brief copyright notice. All information and images are intended to be used under the fair use clause of the copyright laws. But actually we know most of the people we got our information from, and some of the information is actually from ourselves. Dr. Kent Hovind, Dr. Chuck Missler, Dr. Carl Bohr, Dr. David Roseveare, and Dr. Roger Oakland. The Bible says right at the beginning, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. That's how the Bible starts. And in fact, God created everything. I'm just going to repeat a little bit of the first teaching on creation, and then we'll get stuck into evolution is impossible, because it really is impossible on a scientific basis. God created the heavens, and then he created the solar systems, and then he created the planets, and the earth, and the clouds, and the sea, and the birds, and the dolphins, and the dogs, and even you and me. And the person who did that, of course, is Jesus Christ himself. He's the one who created everything 6,000 years ago. Now, the first question we all need to ask ourselves and have the clear answer to is actually how old is the whole universe and how old is planet Earth according to the Bible. And this is very important because most people in school and university are taught that this universe is 20 billion years old. That's simply not true, not according to the Bible or according to all the science that I've ever looked at. And we're going to be talking about that over the next 1 hour. Now, Luke was a medical doctor, and in Luke chapter 3 he gave the ancestors of Jesus Christ, the genealogy of Jesus Christ. It starts in Luke chapter 3, starting at verse 23. It gives 77 generations. I'm not going to read them through them all because it would take a long time. But trust me, there are 77 generations, and that's a very important number because 77 is the supernatural number of God. And it says that Adam was the son of God, and it goes down through Seth and Enos and all the other ones, including names you might remember, like Methuselah and Noah and Abraham and Isaac, and all the way down through Joseph and to Jesus himself. 77 generations. Now, I've assigned a number, 50, for each of the generations. Now, I know nowadays a generation tends to be about 30, but I've assigned 50 simply because before the flood, which was 4,400 years ago, the patriarchs lived much longer. So just roughly, I've assigned 77 generations of 50 years each, makes a total of 3,850 years. Now this is approximate. It wouldn't matter if it was 40 years, 50 years, 60 years or 70 years or whatever. We want approximate figures. So approximately from the creation of Adam to the birth of Jesus is 4,000 years. And we know from the birth of Jesus to now is roughly 2,000 years. So the creation of Adam to now is roughly 6,000 years. However, Jesus said something very, very important. He said it in Mark 10 verse 6, from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. He also said it in Matthew 19:4, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? So what's Jesus saying here? He's basically saying that Adam and Eve were created at the very beginning of the creation. Well, we've just worked out that Adam and Eve were in fact created 6,000 years ago, so guess what? We now know, because of what Jesus said, how old the whole universe is. It's 6,000 years old, and that's a tremendous shock for a lot of people, because the evolutionists have taught in schools and universities that this universe started out of nothing, something called the Big Bang, 20 billion years ago. They also teach that the Earth formed about 4.6 billion years ago, and life appeared 3 billion years ago by chance out of the primordial slime, and man evolved 3 million years ago. Man evolved from the animals. That's of course not what the Bible says. I just read the scriptures to you from Luke chapter 3, where it says Adam is the son of God, not the son of a monkey. Now, this puts creation in direct and enormous conflict with evolution. because you can see that creation happened 6,000 years ago and evolution happened 20 billion years ago. And there's a huge difference between 6,000 years and 20 billion years. So we're going to look very carefully at evolution. Now there are actually 6 types of evolution. There's cosmic evolution, which is the origin of time, space and matter. That's the Big Bang. Then there's chemical evolution. That's the origin of higher elements from hydrogen. There's stellar and planetary evolution. That's the origin of stars and planets. There's organic evolution, which is the origin of life. Then there's macroevolution, which is changing from one kind or species to another kind or species. And then there's microevolution, which is variation within kinds. And frankly, only this one, you've only ever seen microevolution. None of you have ever seen, and nor have I, nor has anybody ever seen, actually been present at any of these other so-called evolutions. Cosmic evolution, chemical evolution, stellar and planetary evolution, organic evolution or macroevolution has never been seen or observed. Now, Charles Darwin wrote his book in 1859. It's called The Origin of Species. And actually it's changed the course of history. He wrote his book, which is all about evolution, his theory, and we're going to look quite carefully at what he actually saw and what he deduced. What he actually observed, he went to the Galapagos Islands, which is about 600 miles west of South America. What he actually observed was finches with different length and breadths of beak. Now, what he actually observed was microevolution, or variation within one species. He actually saw all these 14 different types of finches, and he noticed that it had different lengths and breadths of beaks. In fact, the variations are quite small, and some later visitors actually had trouble identifying exactly what he discovered, because they all look vaguely similar. However, there may well be variation within a species, because we see that with all species, so nobody has a problem with microevolution. He also proposed what's called natural selection. That natural selection was proposed by Darwin as the mechanism for evolution. And what is commonly proposed is, as an example, is 2 types of pepper moth. They're simply black moths and white moths found in northern England. The black moth is called a melanic pepper moth, and the white one is called a typica pepper moth. And this is often quoted as proof of evolution. It's actually not really. What basically happened, sorry about that, what basically happened in the north of England in the industrial 1850s, around the time of the birth and life of Darwin, was that the industrial north was a very sooty place, and all the trees were rather blackened with all the soot from the chimneys. So the black melanic pepper moths had very good natural camouflage. They were black and they could conceal themselves very easily on the black barks of the trees. Unfortunately, the poor old typica white moths didn't have the same advantage, and they were selectively picked off by all the birds. And that's often quoted as a type of evolution or natural selection. Now that's quite different to, on the 6th day, we read in Genesis, God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth, each according to its kind." So God actually created things according to its different kinds. We call them species now. And so we see different species of dogs and rabbits and chickens and guinea pigs and all sorts of different things. And they're different species. Now, one of the major problems, as far as I can see, with evolution is it actually goes against some of the main and very important laws of physics. The most important law of physics is the first law of thermodynamics. And this is what it says. The first law of dynamics basically states, matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. Repeat that again. You can't create matter or energy from nothing. So the creation of matter and energy from nothing is actually opposed to the most important law of physics. It's opposed to the first law of thermodynamics. You see, the evolutionists say that 20 billion years ago, they weren't there. I wasn't there either, but they say, long time ago, there was a big bang. There was a very big bang, and everything came out of nothing. That's not what the Bible says at all. The Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and only very recently, 6,000 years ago. Now, this is the Humanist Manifesto, published in 1933. Humanists regard the universe as self-existing and not created, which is actually not what the Bible says at all. So you can make your choice. You can either believe what the humanists have to say, that the universe is self-existing and not created, or you can believe what the Bible says. It's your choice. Now, here's a typical textbook, The Birth and Death of the Universe, and it talks about this is Prentice Hall General Science. It says that 18 to 20 billion years ago, all the matter in the universe was concentrated into one very dense, very hot region that may have been much smaller than the period on this page. And that's called the Big Bang. Now, the Big Bang began with a Belgian astronomer called George-Edward Lemaitre, who died in 1966. And according to Isaac Asimov, some of you may have heard of him from his very good books on science fiction, but he was also quite a prominent scientist, Lemaitre conceived this mass to be no more than a few light years in diameter. At the very least, that would be 2 light years, or about 12 trillion miles. So I'm sure you appreciate that George Edward Lemaitre conceived that everything evolved from something that was 12 trillion miles across, which was big. By 1965, that figure was reduced to 275 million miles. By 1974, to 54,000 miles. By 1983, to a trillionth the diameter of a proton. And now to nothing at all. So you can see that in the space of, I don't know, maybe under 40 years, it's actually changed from a huge, something massive, to something so small, it's nothing at all. That's called a singularity. It says here, on creating something from nothing, it says the observable universe could have evolved from an infinitesimal region. It's then tempting to go one step further and speculate that the entire universe evolved from literally nothing. Now, the Big Bang theory is opposed to the second law of thermodynamics. So that's the second most important law in physics. Let's look at the second law of thermodynamics. If you tossed a pile of bricks off the back of a lorry, would you expect the pile of bricks to look like the one on the left or the one on the right? I think you'd agree with me that disorder is more probable. Well, according to the second law of thermodynamics, we have to deal with something called entropy, which means that everything basically goes downhill. Here's an attractive young lady at the age of 20, and here's the same lady at the age of 90. And here's the same lady at 3,000. You notice she didn't get better, she got worse. And that's because of the second law of thermodynamics. It's because of entropy. That's why a hot cup of coffee cools down, the sun is cooling down, the earth is slowing down, our metabolic rate slows as we grow older, and a high energy system will always decay to a low energy system. So evolution, if it were true, would reverse this invariable rule which we see around us wherever we look. Conclusion based on the second law of thermodynamics is simply that evolution is impossible. Now, evolutionists assume that by adding energy to an open system, this will simply overcome the second law of thermodynamics. However, God doesn't regard our universe as an open system. In fact, he regards it as a closed system. There are actually 11, there's height, width, and depth, and then there's time, and various other things as well. And God lives outside time completely. So as far as God is concerned, this universe is a closed system. Now, if you add energy, the evolutionists claim that adding energy will organize the system. However, our observations are that adding energy is destructive. When we add energy to something, it's very destructive. Now, for example, in the Second World War, there were atomic bombs added to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that's the closest we can get to